That's an introduction. Good morning. Big Fun Gymnastics and Recreational Services. I started about 2000. I was at that point finishing up my profession as a musician. I had a bachelor's in music from USC. All that was working swell, but I finally realized as I got older that the world didn't need another musician, but the world may need someone working with these kids. So I switched occupations. The term occupational therapy is kind of misguided in that it doesn't explain really what an occupational therapist does. To do occupations, they primarily require the use of your upper body, your vision, your brain, your hands. So occupational therapy is in regarding to your use of your body through your upper extremity, your hands, and how you connect. So what I want you to look at now is this is just an example of an occupation. This is a person's rollerblading. Look at the movement pattern. Sweep out, sweep out, sweep out. Now the fluidness of the movement was something that takes a time to acquire. Then you have the understanding of movement with speed, agility, clarification of vision perception. So the idea of movement is not something that is frivolous to occupational therapists. It's the humanness of why we are here. Organization. That is the gold standard for what happens in the academic world. Here's some things about organizational behavior. Does the child act dependently or independently? Is the child impulsive, distractible, disorganized? Can the child begin sequencing a series of movement patterns independently and correctly after 2 or 4 repeated passes? Does the child remember an assigned course or task after repeating it several times? Does the child initiate a plan, tasks, or does she need assistance? Does the child have verbal use, nonverbal? Is the child able to sign? Does the child make eye contact? The objective here is to know what you're looking for, to know what you're trying to address, and to know why the child does what the child is doing. That may be an indication of why they're doing negative behaviors, because they're trying to engage in something other than what we are doing. Arousal refers to the level of alertness and responsiveness to environmental stimuli, as well as sensations arising from one's own body. What you're seeing here is a child navigating what we do on parallel bars. You'll notice that the ladders that are on there, they do have a wobble in the middle, and that makes it something that they have to, they need to attend to. Rather than just blithely walking across without being aware of what they're doing, they need to stay focused on their activity so that their memory of that particular challenge is intact the next time they get to it. Very often we'll see that type of child oblivious to what they're doing because they're just in the thrall of doing. But at the same time, I don't want that kid not being aware of their safety and their precautions that are necessary to acquire safe skill. This is Emma. Watch Emma navigate through in her organization. She has to remember where to place her feet. She has to remember how to hold on with her hands. You'll notice that the barrel is unstable. We do that purposefully. The reason, again, is that if the barrel were stable, unmovable, this would be a pretty easy challenge for her, but it is not, which means that she's got to use her entire body, her vision, and her presence to modulate, to acquire the skill necessary to traverse that P-bar and that barrel. Right now, she's seeking the constant touch, proprioceptive wise. So she's problem solving at the same time. She's trying to create a sequence of movement. She knows where she wants to go, but the challenge is to get there. Memory. This is Wyatt. Wyatt is going to show you active memory. Active memory versus working memory. When you learn how to do something for the first time, it's new, it's novel. That novelty demands your attention and your arousal to it. When you've acquired that skill, then you go into what we would simply refer to as rehearsal. You rehearse the same skill until it becomes an acquired skill that you do not need to think about. So you go from something new and novel into something you repeat and rehearse. When you're in that rehearsal mode, it's referred to as active memory. However, in order to acquire that skill, that is when you are doing something new and novel. Human beings learn exclusively in working memory, meaning we acquire new and novel when it is just that. If it's something you've acquired before, then the brain can interpret that as, I got it. Working memory is essential to our ability as teachers to recognize that we're teaching. The idea is that if we can get a child like Wyatt, who has a lot of complications, to do something as complex as a front flip, that's pretty cool. This is Emma, who you met a little while ago. If you'll notice, look at the knees, how they invert and how the ankles invert. What she's doing again here on the swing, and we're modulating it, is that she's going laterally. There aren't many opportunities in the world to go laterally. So this is intense for her. And what she's trying to do right now is work her standing balance with legs that are not necessarily cooperative. So she's got to learn how to learn to use that part of her body better, which was the thrust from when we started with her. The idea of left to right, right to left is part of the developmental progressions, which as children, young children, we are trying to make sure that they all happen on a sequential basis that is correct. Here's the point with this: directions. Learning how to go straight forward, learning how to go backward, learning how to go left to right, right to left is not something that automatically happens to every child. As a matter of fact, with special needs, it doesn't happen often. We as neurotypical human beings learn how to go first forward and up. That's because our vision as neonates gives us that concept of there's something forward and there's something up. After forward and up, the next sequence must come as down and back. The next sequential movement in progression is going from left to right. But often enough, we'll get a kid that goes left to right pretty poorly, but does go right to left better. If the child is doing a better version of right to left, then we have to go back and readdress left to right. Here's simply an example of one of the obstacle courses. You'll notice again that there are a lot of pieces here that are movable. If you see the small round piece, it rolls. So the idea is that they get to use different objects differently. Working with special needs, that the obstacle course is an essential component that is really where the beef gets done, because you can construct an obstacle course on the floor that is in one line and ends as one line. Everything is connected, which gives the child constant motion and a choice of direction, unless you're telling them, no, go this way, go that way. But the challenge on each of those pieces is pretty much evident. So the idea that you have in the gymnastic arena, you have so much potential firepower, especially nowadays. Motor planning. The idea of motor planning is against gravity. Gravity is relentless. It never ends. So the idea of, as an athlete or a movement, we have to confine ourselves to dealing with gravity all the time. Being in a crouch position, you're avoiding wind coming at you. You say, what are the moving parts on the rollerblade? Is it upper extremity? No, it's mid-trunk, lower extremity. So learning how to move is progressive. And again, the idea that we can always sequence, if we understand where we're trying to acquire that movement plan, the sequence dictates how well we are moving. Again, how well we are moving is indicative of working versus active memory, which is indicative of organization, which is indicative of sensory processing. This is Micah. Micah is learning how to navigate and move. You'll notice that he's rolling the barrel. He's got to keep his hands in front to keep the body and gravity in check. Also, I don't know if you can see it, but there are bungee cables at midline that he has to step over. Can you see them now? So that increases the difficulty because he's got to problem solve at the same time he's trying to sequence how he moves. Occupational therapy exists in school districts, in the classroom, and elsewhere in pediatrics, because we're constantly dealing with a child's difficulty working visually at midline and getting fine motor, writing your name. The position I take on that is I do not subscribe to making a child work fine motor for writing his name, mostly because these kids that are challenged to write their name will never write their name well, but they can get a rubber stamp that signs their name. So why we get them to learn how to use a computer keyboard, that's much more important for them. But what I'm really actually getting toward is, if you want to fix what goes on here at your hands and fingers, it's not your hands and fingers that need to be addressed. It's further up anatomically. It is, in fact, the scapula. We all know that the scapula is the bilateral. There are two plates in the back of your body, upper extremity, and they have these kind of motions. As I bring my shoulders up, the scapula lets you do that rising. If I bring them down, they let them go down. If I wing out, it's because they wing out. If I bring them in, it's because they bring them in. But when you use them in conjunction to all that you're doing naturally, you have to become aware that the scapula is, in fact, the key to fine motor. I raised the point that how many muscles are actually attached to the scapula? 28 muscles are attached to the scap bilaterally. So everything we do down here is because the scap permits us to do that. So rather than honing away at frustrating a child who cannot address fine motor because they will never figure it out, you can figure out what's going on back here, because everything we do in gymnastics involves grasp and upper extremity use and coordination. So it's not a frivolous activity to recognize how powerful the anatomy and the knowledge of the anatomy helps you dealing with these kids. This is Emma. You just saw she's rolling the barrel on the tumble track. Now the tumble track is unstable because it's soft and it's like a trampoline. What it is she's going backward. Look at how she locks the legs and she steps back. So that's where her difficulty is at that point. She's fairly new to us. But rolling backward was something that she has not done. We know that. Rolling forward was something that you can pretty well typically figure out that, yeah, sure, you can do that. But backward utilizes a different set of muscles in the body that do not get used at the same rate. So that's a good tool. Next.
Okay.
Using gymnastics as therapy. This is Emma. Look at her legs as she runs. Look at the arms. Watch how much, there's so much wasted energy. Look at how the wide-based gait. Her feet are very wide apart. She does that because she is unstable. And again, when you get her on trampoline, she loves trampoline, but she doesn't know how to attain all of that energy. The use of hands is all she perceives. The use of legs is kind of a minimal distraction. But what she's doing with the arms is she's fluttering all over the place. Now, as she runs, unless we can get those arms down and moving functionally, as she runs, she's distracting with one arm and complying with another. So what I have to do with her is I have to take the arm that is complying, helping her balance, and I strap it into her waist with Velcro. And the arm that is distracting and all over the place, when it doesn't have the availability of counterbalancing, it becomes a lot more stable, more function oriented. And then you begin to see that when she runs down the tumble track, instead of bouncing side, 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 she's going straight line down the middle. So that it helps her with her balance and her navigation and motor planning. And again, she's successful. So she's in an arousal state. The optimal zone of arousal. That is the buzzword. The optimal zone of arousal is sensorily, you are both proprioceptively and vestibularly organized. You have started your session, you got the kid on trampoline, proprioception, you got the kid on swing, vestibular, linear rotation. So the kid is organized sensorily. That means you're in the optimal zone of arousal. So your potential for learning how to learn with that child is at its maximal best. Now, what's interesting is that not everybody gets into that giant vaulted optimal zone of arousal and it stays there. They may hit it and plummet soon. So what do? You go back and you begin to utilize your gym as a sensory convention. Everything in that gym is sensorially intense. Gymnastics is, to my appreciation, the art of movement. Challenges us as human beings to defy gravity. The longer we are able to hold our position up in the air, the more we can do up in the air, and then we land. Bilateral coordination is where, predictably, both arms are doing the same task. And that means they're utilizing a stable trunk. If the trunk is unstable, everything that hangs off of it is unstable. This is Ethan. Ethan is severely autistic with a lot of other complications meteorologically. And he's not a happy kid. Right there. So does he use his hands appropriately? Not really. So he doesn't like using his hands. Look at his feet. He is flat-footed. So stepping on those ladders is not comfortable. So he's got to figure out how to get off of there as quickly as possible. So what we're doing with him is we're trying to get him to move quicker through the process so that in an emergency, he can move quicker. Again, as I coach my therapists, California it's a matter of time before we have a massive earthquake. And if we're trying to save children in the environment that happen to be caught in it, you get a kid that's resistant to being told, come with me now. Well, that's not going to work because that can jeopardize both you and the child. So the idea that if I say jump, you jump, it's not negotiable. But again, that's way I operate. That doesn't mean that that's how you operate.
Oh, sorry.
Something also that I want to clue in on is that very often we get kids that are used to having one or more enablers within their family. What happens with that is difficult because the enabling means that the child will not necessarily attend to your words, they'll attend to the person that enables them. If I have an enabling mom that wants to see what's going on, the child will attend to mom, not to the therapist. So those are difficult issues, but we have to have mom or the enabler to back away, go sit down, chill out, and then you'll get a better result from the child. However, yeah, you can play that.
Which
However,
one? This one?
the back one. Yeah. However, once you allow the child to engage with you get this kind of stuff. Shane has been with me for over 10 years, and that took about 5 years to acquire. Shane now plays football, he plays hockey, and he's doing pretty well. What Shane wants to do is be included with neurotypical guys. He's dying to be part of that grouping. So the things he does now are based on what will get me into that group. So we don't necessarily do heavy tumbling. What we're doing now is a lot of bodybuilding. So his focus on what to do has changed and morphed into something a little bit more oriented to function. I want to function within the acquired group of older boys. Questions?
Go ahead. I have a question for you.
Hit me.
Early in your presentation, you said something about sensory input from an earlier age actually leading to higher academics. And I think that's something as just a lot of us feel, but might not know the science behind. Can you explain that a little more and how the sensory input will actually help education?
Great, good question. All right. The ability of a human being to acquire novelty is necessarily even. Not everyone comes to the bargaining table with the same ability to acquire. So what we have to do is find out, first off, sensorially, what does this person dislike? Why? What does this person enjoy? Why? So we have something like swing. When I get a kid that comes to me from another therapy shop and the word is that the kid is gravitationally insecure, they cannot tolerate being off the planet under any circumstance, inclusive of walking upstairs, then my immediate reaction is that's not a usable sacrifice because that would mean a lack of vestibular and proprioceptive input, which drives brain function. If we do not acquire that, then there's a loss of language, there's a loss of computation, there's a loss of problem solving, there's a loss of mechanical acuity. Without vestibular input, you are missing too much visually. You just can't keep up. Again, that's why these young gymnasts that are in the gym all the time doing rotations 5 and 6 hours at a hit, they are able to take information almost immediately and transfer it from here into here. That's a gift. But again, not everyone has that potential for engaging that gift. The kids that do are the ones that are the high scorers usually. And again, Mike, this is something that just to keep you in mind. Years ago, I had a conversation with Caroli, and we were arguing that what's the point of getting a kid who's having beginning of their menstrual cycle, and all of a sudden they can't do a back handspring on beam. He thought it was because the child was having mental complication that was just way beyond the child's skill. And I came out there, and it was basically because the child was brand new to that. Once she got past that, she was back on board. So it had nothing to do with controlling her body as much as it had to do, the body was controlling her. So it was an out-of-pocket experience for her. The idea that from proprioception and vestibular and tactile and everything else we have available as human beings enhances our ability to be present. Getting into the optimal zone of arousal is one of the steps that gets you there. If you, as a professional athlete or even a recreational athlete, step into your workout without being aware, then the likelihood is you're not really engaged, or you're hoping that the workout brings you up to that involvement. Well, by that point, you've missed 5-10 minutes of your workout. So the idea is prep before you do the heavy lifting, be engaged. The idea of creating an arousal state is essential for your best performance capable. If, by example, I don't know if you remember Carl Lewis, a member of the U.S. Olympic team about 10, 15 years ago. He has acquired an inordinate amount of gold medals. But if you look at the amount of gold medals and you put all of the amount of time it took him to win all of those medals, it comes in under 4 minutes. Every one of his medals adds up to time, and 4 minutes. It takes the body at least 2 minutes of rigorous exercise to bring your heart rate up. He won gold medals, half of them, before he even had his heart rate up. That's something to consider. So the idea is that the machine needs to be in its best optimal arrangement in order to be successful. That is your body's prep, your mental computation to prepare yourself and to prepare your athletes and your kids. The idea that we have that ability available to us makes what we do that much more powerful. So again, the idea that Big Fun takes the sensory processing as integral to our humanness, meaning we as human beings learn to move before we learn to think or speak. Movement is part of our humanness, so it is essential that we are skilled at it.
In today's world, it seems like so many students, and especially the Cal State Dominguez students, you that are going into physical education it isn't completely understood and by the regular teacher in the classroom in so many cases I've observed over the years. And that is shocking, but it's not so shocking to you all of you, because you will know something from what you've picked up in your other physical education class, more physical education classes, so to speak, at Dominguez Hills. And then hopefully from this small touch of gymnastics world, of the gymnastics world, because it's so important for you to know what good, great, magnificent things that you're doing with your children, that you're teaching softball skills, baseball skills, soccer, volleyball, every sport that you're introducing to them, you're introducing them into a sport that's going to their involvement in the sport. You're not just getting them involved for a heartbeat, to get their heartbeat up. That's surely a byproduct, but it's to help them emotionally, psychologically, physically, and to be able to handle the stress of and challenges of the classroom, and be able to focus like they do with you and PE, focus in the classroom similarly and get similar outcome, which is why most athletes end up, as they grow further participation in a sport, their academics just go straight up. Seeing that happen day after day after day, year after year through the last several years period.
So do you only work with students or kids that have a diverse ability, and would you do the same activities with kids that don't have a diverse ability? Are there still benefits to doing it even if you're not working on a specific thing?
Well,
yeah, good question.
Can I touch that first?
Yeah.
Because I know you'll have a great deal more. When I work with children with have no particular difficulties, which has been many cases throughout the last 40 years, that I automatically am attracted to the child that has some kind of special need, because I'm aware of things that make the child stand out a little bit more with whatever challenge they may have. Most of the time it's very small and it's not as large as if you had a population that you knew you were going into that has special needs of a multitude of types. Gene.
Yeah, well said, Mike. The idea that what I do in Big Fun is meant strictly for special needs is not correct. What I notice is that when I set up an obstacle course by example, I can tell if it's a good course because the neurotypical kids can't stay off of it, which pisses off their coaches, but they just love being on it. Again, I've tapped into what is visually compelling. You saw that picture of a barren obstacle course that's got the ladders and whatnot. Everyone wants to get in and get onto it, which is exactly what I want. I want them to feel compelled to get onto it. It has nothing to do with special needs or anything. It's simply visually attentive to what these kids are looking for. The benefit is the exact same as it would be for a special need kid, for the neurotypical kids. They get on, they learn to climb, and it's very function oriented. Again, when I set up these courses, most of the gyms, they will have their coaches ask me, can we get our kids on there? Of course you can. Exactly what I'm looking for. And again, the idea that it's challenging. By example, if you've been in outdoor parks in LA, there's usually this big giant girder structure that the kids get to climb on. And what happens is that the kids get there and they immediately climb and ransack the place. But within 15, 20 minutes, they realize that nothing here is going to change. It's the exact same climbing that I was on last week and the week before. When we set up an obstacle course for Big Fun, in 20 years, it's never been the same course ever. The idea is that it challenges the child, not necessarily in novelty, but in active memory. They know how to do this, so now I can expand on it. Or it is in fact novel. I don't know how to do this, therefore I better figure out what I'm doing. But that isn't exclusive to the special needs brain. It is all human beings. They get challenged visually, they learn visually, they use whatever tools they have to problem solve. What we're looking to try to do is engage that more predictably rather than hope it happens. I put them in the situation where you better figure out what you're doing because I'm not going to help you, especially when they have the firepower to do. If they're not doing it, then they're waiting for someone to rescue them. I don't want my kids feeling that they need to be rescued. I want them to feeling that they can in fact do. So it's never an issue where we're saying, oh, you don't want to do it, not a problem. It's, oh, you don't want to do it, tough, get going. Chew on that one. And again, once the kid gets past that initial fear, then it's like, yep, no problem, Gene, give me that. I can do it again. Great. So, which is what we're looking for. Brianna, what is your movement experience? What do you have?
I'm a kinesiology major with the teaching option.
Did you have a athletic event when you were younger?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports growing up. In high school, I mainly focused on lacrosse. So I played varsity lacrosse, and I played club and travel too.
But again, you see, that's precisely what we need now. What I'm looking to try and engage is the students that I'm getting are mostly female. And the problem is that the females comes into the arena not knowing how to be demonstrative, not knowing how to be the one in control, the alpha chica. So they back off, and I'm trying to get them to do just the opposite because the child views that person immediately as an enabler. All females are enablers. My mom's an enabler, therefore so are you. And what I have to do is break that female out of being docile. I don't want to touch the child. Well, as a matter of fact, they're looking to see if you're not going to touch them because that confirms their belief that you're an enabler. You can't do that. So we have to empower the women to be stronger.
Thank you, Gene.
Gene, thank you very much.
We'll talk soon.
Good. Thank you again. It was a pleasure speaking with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Big Fun Gymnastics.
We're going to round this out super, super quick. One of the things Gene said when he talked about sensory input from a young age leading to higher academics, that right there is one of the benefits of taking gymnastics in grades K through 5 and how it'll benefit them before getting into any other sports. So I didn't even have that on the little PowerPoint we're going to go over, but if you want to go ahead and write that in, that could be a great paragraph. It makes a lot of sense. Higher academics is always a good thing, and that's definitely a benefit.
And that's why in most of the time you read about a high-level optional girl particularly, but it's just absolutely the same for the boy in gymnastics and or high-level sports. Most of the time, though, the story in the paper, your local paper, is a young lady is has stopped gymnastics and has gone to diving at UCLA. And she became one of the top divers within the first year of being on the team. I have heard over and over and over again, locally and nationally and internationally, boy or girl stops gymnastics where they've learned and maximized their strength, endurance, flexibility, agility, and the love of movement, to whether it's lacrosse, whether it's diving, whether it's springboard or platform. You'll see platform diving, and they all start with a straight arm, straight legged press to a handstand on the edge of the platform. They've done gymnastics before the diving team in college. They probably have done either both or gymnastics before. The need, if you have any opportunity in your near futures, wherever you go to work, to start a small gymnastics program on or off campus recreation center utilizing the multi-purpose room at the school somehow. I've done that before too, and it's been very successful. They enjoy added use of the facility.
So we have 4 main points. One other thing Gene talked about before we go into this is the fact that gymnastics is actually used as a therapy all across the US and in other countries as well. And it really does help with behavioral issues in children. So some people have some sensory overload issues or they need more mental stimulation, and gymnastics is used as therapy to treat some of those behavioral issues in younger kids. So that's just another point right there. So we have R4, we have those two from Gene. This could be your entire paper right here if you take notes well. This one is just a review. This first thing we talked about this year was vault. So remember, vault had those 6 steps. It was the run, hurdle, the punch, entry, exit, and landing. So just for an example, I took one of the things out of those 6 and said that punch through the landing is all about understanding how to use your body. So you can't punch properly, enter a vault table, exit correctly, and land unless you understand how to use your body. You engage in your shoulders and block, bend your knees on your landing. Vault is the first time moving to higher ground. Out of all the vents at those earlier levels, this is kind of the first time you're moving to a higher ground. So the way it's helping these young children is they're taking that fear away from going up, right? Some people as adults or as teens aren't super comfortable with heights or, bridges or things like that. And vault is something really cool because at an early age, we're kind of taking that fear away from moving to higher ground and having to jump off of higher ground. So it's something we don't think about often, but when you watch these little kids doing it at ages 4 and 5, it's a big step to go up and then have to jump off and work on your landings and things like that. So moving to higher ground is super important at that age. Learning how to perfect the little things. Now, this is an important one. Vault progressions get much more advanced as they go. So before a gymnast can go on to compete a Yurchenko triple full, they're going to have to get that jump up to their knees, stand on your feet, and then jump, stick your landing. It's all about perfecting the foundation and not skipping steps. Because in anything you do and in any sport you do, we've said this analogy a couple times, you can't shoot a 3-pointer unless you learn how to do a layup. You're not going to hit any home runs unless you can hit a fielder. In every sport, you have to perfect your foundation before you're given that opportunity to do the bigger things. So that's for our vault. That was day 1. We're going to get into now the importance of why we think that kids should take gymnastics levels K through 5 and how it's going to benefit them in life as opposed to other sports. So safety is a big one. We have touched on safety pretty much all semester. And what this is children learning from an early age how to fall safely and protect their bodies. So some of the first things that we do, and we've touched on this a lot, is teaching the kids how to fall. So if you're going to go down to the ground, you don't want to put your arms in front. You want to cross your arms. You want to round your body so that you can roll. In a forward roll and in a backwards roll, which we said are the fundamental skills, we always teach chin to chest, protect your neck. Teaching safety from an early age is going to help these kids with whatever sport they're doing, even if it's not a sport, if they just happen to take a fall with their friends when they're on a hike. If you were a gymnast, you know how to fall safely, you know how to protect yourself and avoid injury. So athletes learn the proper positions to fall in to avoid injuries, as we just said, and it learns how to listen to your body and identify problems it might be having. So what I meant by this was, unfortunately, when you're doing gymnastics, there's a lot of pounding. So there's a lot of pounding on the ground. Your legs are taking a lot of impact. Your arms are supporting yourself. You need to take care of your body when you're in a sport like this. And sometimes we have level 10 or elite level athletes who might be around the ages of 13 to 14. That's a very young age to be performing such high level skills. But at this point, these kids have really learned how to listen to their body and say, hey, I'm having some shoulder pain. It's not extreme. I need ice. Or, hey, I need to see the physical therapist. I got to stretch out my shoulder. We have a lot of things in the gym, such as lacrosse balls to roll out your feet, to roll out any sort of muscle tightness and things like that. So these kids are essentially getting, in a lot of cases, we'll have somebody in the gym who is either a nurse, who is a physical therapist. Some of the staff usually has some sort of medical experience to be able to help those kids. So in our gym, we have a coach named April, who is a nurse. She's worked in a hospital, and she's our go-to. If I ever have a kid that says, I'm having a knee problem, my knee feels a little out of place here, I'll send them right to April, and April knows what to do. Having somebody like that around is really awesome to help not only the staff, but the children as well, because now these kids who are, 12, 13, some of them even younger, are learning how to identify all right, that shoulder pain, it's just a little bit of tightness. I'm going to roll it out. That way, as an adult and whatever other sports you're doing, you know exactly what's happening. You can listen to your body and say, hey, I'm not feeling too well right now in this certain part of my body. I'm not going to perform this skill A or B to avoid any sort of injuries. All right, mental toughness. So we're almost done. We have 2 to go. Mental toughness. Athletes learn what their body is truly capable of and how to push through obstacles. So this is a big one. Gymnastics, when you look at it from the outside, is not an easy sport. And when you look at it from the inside, it is still not an easy sport. There's a lot of times that kids will say, oh, I don't think I'm ever going to get to that skill, or I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do this. With the proper training, with the proper drills and skills and shapings, these athletes end up performing things a lot of them never thought they would do. And I can tell you that I've had some kids who come into the sport with a little bit of mental blocks or mental issues. They don't think they can tumble backwards. They have a horrible fear of going backwards, and they don't think they're ever going to do it. When that child pushes through and does the drills and the progressions and takes the time and starts tumbling backwards, that's a huge confidence boost. And that's a huge help to their mental toughness. So when they go into the real world and they say, this job I've just been given at work is way too tough for me, I don't think they can do it, they're going to be a little more tough and say, you know what, I never thought I'd be able to tumble backwards, and I did it. I worked the skills, I worked the side stations, and I built it up. So teaching mental toughness is something that they don't really know they're getting every day, but it's going to end up sticking with them wherever they go. So we put, there are times gymnasts must push through their fears to see success. And just like in life, some things may be scary, but there is a reward at the end. So talking about fear and all these things, a lot of kids, when you get to the higher levels, will not want to perform these skills. When there's double flipping skills, when there's flipping vaults, double flipping dismounts, those things like that always take everything from A to B. It went from something you've been doing for a very long time that didn't seem super hard to a very high flying skill that has potential for danger. The fear is a very real thing, and it's very normal. A lot of things are going to scare you in life, but when you push through and you're able to overcome that fear, you're going to do a pretty cool skill, and that reward is just as big. And this, again, happens in every sport. It happens in careers. It happens in life. There's a lot of things that might scare you, and you don't think you can do them necessarily. But when you take the right steps and you push through, that's a really good feeling at the end when you accomplish what you thought you might never have.
And that means, in regards to your working with your experiences in lacrosse, softball, baseball, soccer, football, whatever sport you're working in, and you have success in, that's going to absolutely carry over into the classroom, because you're going to say, well, I really had a hard time learning that particular skill in soccer or lacrosse or volleyball, but I didn't give up. I kept trying harder to achieve success in that particular difficulty that I had that's in my sport. I didn't give up, and I kept on working through and asking questions, how I can become better at that sport. That's such a key to all the students, going to be a key to their lives, maybe that you're working with in the near future. I can't underestimate, and I always be mentioning that, the importance of what you're going to be doing and how important it is to each of the individuals that you're teaching. And coaching is teaching, and teaching is coaching. Don't let anyone anymore, maybe academic teacher, wherever you're at, ever talk down to you as you being a lesser person at that school. You are as meaningful as the math teacher, the science teacher, anyone there, because you help them develop the instruments to conquer life, and conquer only in the positive sense of the word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have one last slide to go here. These are things that are going to help when kids take gymnastics at an earlier age. These are the life benefits. This is the last one that we had in here. Stress relief is a big one. Gymnastics is a great way for young athletes to exert energy in a positive way. Now, this is tying directly into everything Gene was just talking about, all those really important things about, what do we have here? We had the sensory inputs from an earlier age, things like that, kids being overstimulated and needing certain relief. It can be stress relief for kids who have some sort of mental disabilities or certain challenges, people on the autism spectrum, also regular or kids who are not on the spectrum as well. Any athlete, any young child, kids with too much energy, it's a great way to exert that energy in a positive way. It really is a great way to help these kids that are in those certain situations. The other thing keeping athletes safe and in the gym is keeping them away from potentially harmful situations. Now we're talking, there are kids in certain situations who, if they didn't have the gym, maybe the other alternative was not a positive one. Now, as Gene said, Mike has said it before, and I've said it before, a lot of these athletes are in the gym 4 to 5, sometimes 6 days a week. And we have them for about 4 to 5 hours a day. So it becomes their home. It's their home away from home. It's their safe place. You know, their coaches and their teammates. It's a family. It's really, it's not a, you see them once a week and you have a practice and you go thing. It becomes your family. It becomes your home away from home. And some kids really need that home more than you might even know. And sometimes it takes years of coaching them until you find out that their home life maybe wasn't the best. And if they didn't get into gymnastics, it was going to be them hanging out on the streets with their friends, late night, potentially not getting into some good stuff. And all these other kids in the gym that they're surrounded by, who, you know, at our gym too, we have homework hours occasionally where we'll have a kid sit out during an event if they need to do homework because they don't have the time. Some of our kids are in situations where they come straight from school and then they have to wait a little extra after practice to get picked up by a babysitter. And then they live a little bit further away. And when they're with us, they get to practice, they get to do their homework, and they're around other kids who are also training these really difficult skills and talking about school. And it's a really, really positive environment.
Such a positive environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have here too, this is the last thing, and me and Mike were talking about this the other day in a meeting that we had, was that the gym is a place to escape and leave your troubles at the door. And you as coaches and as educators in whatever situation that you're in, it's up to us to stand by that so that more kids feel that way. Because sometimes, you know, a child might not feel that way, which means that the gym that they're in is not the best place. You should always make it feel like when they get to the gym, they can leave everything behind at that door, escape their troubles, and have a good workout. They can get their energy out, they can focus, they can relieve their stress, they can push themselves to new limits. It's our job to make sure that every child feels like their gym is a home.
And that is the direct analogy to softball practice, all group sport practices. You get to check your troubles at the door and focus on just being the best that child can be at practice that day, and hence creating a great advantage of something great that you're doing on the playing field or in the gym. It's not something they leave on the field or leave in the gym. The things that you teach them, they take directly to the classroom. So important to remember. World-class athletes that would just say the exact same thing that Nick and I are saying here, or any of the other professors you have at Cal State Dominguez Health and Physical Education. I'm sure they are probably preaching very similar things.
All right, guys, I think that being said, that is all we got for today. So enjoy your weekends and we will see you next week.